Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next in our series of talking to some of the leaders in the HR community and beyond. Today is one of the meetings that I've been most excited about. This product is really cool. Our speaker is amazing. I think you're really going to love it. It's really stretching what HR can do and using some different tools to sort of go beyond a little bit of what our normal processes are. Really thinking about the team, really thinking about the individual. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it up to our speaker to sort of introduce herself and talk a little bit about Nomi. And also, please, if you have any questions or comments, put them into the comments here and we can ask them at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Super happy to be here. And yes, please ask questions. Otherwise, I'll just be doing a monologue, which I can do, but I would prefer if I get some questions and insights from you as well, because I know that we have a house full of people who have a lot of experience when it comes to humans, people, teams, organizations. So, would love to hear any insights, any ideas, anything that comes to mind. Doesn't need to be a question. Feel free to share, and John will pass them on to me. I'll very much look forward to that interaction part as well. So feel free to share anything that comes to mind. Welcome from me as well. So I am Maaria Tiensivu, originally from Finland, as maybe some of you can tell based on the double vowels in my name. Currently coming in from Buenos Aires from an Airbnb where I'm staying at, which relates to my kind of way of life, which is location independence. I'm going to touch upon that as well, and any questions that come around that, feel free to share those as well. Happy to answer a bit more about who I am, just to give you a bit of an insight, because I know that people in the audience might mostly come from HR, but there might be some new faces as well. So uh, I'm a lot of X things. I have a quite a squibbly background when it comes to professional development, hence why I also ended up doing what I do. So I'm an ex-service designer, an ex-innovation consultant, and kind of an ex-transformational coach. Again, I put this in quotes because I do actually kind of work on all of these still, but just in my own company now. But yeah, so basically my background is in service design, so design thinking, innovation, how to create change, how to really involve everyone in the organization, help them become more adept, more comfortable with change. One of my favorite parts about innovation consulting was that always got to work with people who had never really done creative work, and everyone kind of came in with like, oh, I can't do this, I'm not creative, da da da, and it was my job to show them that yes, you are, because everyone is. You just need the right tools and structures. Um, and transformational coaching as a newer addition is really about like really helping people through like more deep work and personal development, as well as just the kind of professional sphere as well. So currently, what would I say I am? Like I said, location independent, currently and mostly in Latin America. I'm a founder of Nomi, and what I'm really about is I really want to help people and companies grow, but mostly through experiments. So that's kind of become the red thread, or the main thing that I focus on is like learning by doing, which is rather different from most approaches these days, which is either super data or insight or analytics or understanding, which I love, love, love. As you can imagine, being a coach and consultant, like it's all about that data. But what do we do with that data? And that's something that me and John, we've been talking about a lot, is like the interplay between knowing, understanding, being aware, and what do you actually do with that stuff. So that will be one of the main points of focus for today as well. And I would love to hear your insights and thoughts on what do you find the most challenging between the kind of awareness piece, having the data, the understanding, knowing, and actually turning it into actions, because that's in my experience where where most people, most companies, most teams, it doesn't matter how smart you are, what tools you have, that's the part that is the trickiest one to actually get right and get going. And that's also something that I mostly focus on and work with, so really excited to hear a bit more about that from you all as well. So how do I help people do that? How does Nomi help people do that? Like I said, awareness to action. From awareness to action, from action to awareness. It's a kind of infinite loop. You just keep going between the two. You keep iterating. I wanted to list out some of the things that we usually tend to see when it comes to kind of creating awareness or data or understanding, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, I've worked with most of these. I'm sure you have as well in the audience. So, kind of like getting consultants or outsiders or in-house teams to conduct analysis or reports. I know I have created so many reports that no one ever opened. That was not the best time of my life. I'm sure you can relate. Nothing worse than spending endless amounts of time on something that never gets read or used by anyone. Um, then there's something that Nomi used to be very much like compared to, which is like personality tests, personality profiles, all kinds of like insight tools around that topic. Then there's also the kind of performance reviews, 360s, NPS, whatever these kind of like data gathering tools for performance related issues are. And now we also have more and more kind of like tracking softwares, things that look at what you're doing across different apps. Maybe they push that data somewhere, maybe they don't, but all kinds of tracking that is related to how people work, what you do, how you can optimize, etc. So that's the awareness part. I would say feel free to, by the way, add anything that you would add on that side. What are the things that you are used to using to create that awareness part, the deeper understanding? Then the action part. I put the KPIs and OKRs as the first one because it's super trendy now. However, unfortunately, doesn't always actually lead into action. Can, but needs to be used in a specific way. Then we have the trainings. I added the bulk because it's usually training with the mindset of everyone who comes to this training should have the same problem. This training should answer it, and then everyone should get the same insights or somehow benefit from that same training. Then we have these. This is a newer one, which is like kind of like optimizing life, optimizing your workflow, optimizing your um, productivity, etc., which is usually, at least now, it's AI driven, or at least has AI in the name, if not else. And then we obviously have coaching, even therapy in the corporate context as well these days, and then courses and resources. So by courses and resources, I mean like the graveyard of unopened tabs that we maybe all have on our laptops. I put these all in action because these are the things that we tend to think as action. But when you look at this list, you can probably relate to your own life at least. How many of these have actually led to action? How much change have you actually created by using these things? Again, the potential is there, but does that actually happen? That is the big question that kind of got me into the place I am and made me start Know Me as well in the beginning, because we do have all kinds of tools, but it doesn't seem that we're getting any better at actually turning that insight into action. We just kind of end up spending a lot of time in the awareness part. We understand a lot, we have a lot of data, we have a lot of tools for action, but are we actually acting? Are we doing any action based on that? So there, it seems that the link between the two is the part that's really missing, and that's where Know Me really comes in, and hopefully in a very fun way. So, what is that missing link? What was the kind of insight that Nomi's founded on, and hopefully that will kind of like maybe open your brains on this Friday afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is to you. So the first one I would say, and this is based on years of experience and insight and talking to our clients, is clear focus. What is it that you are working on now? So, one of the key things that we tend to do wrong, especially the smarter you are, the more things you usually have going on at the same time, which we all know leads to probably none of that stuff getting done. So, one of the things that we really, really need and we really want to create with Nomi is clear focus. One thing you're focusing on at any given time. So instead of trying to do 10 things at the same time, a tiny bit here and there and micro tasks here and there, you really just have one focus at any given moment. 1 week, one focus. That's it. Clarity, direction, no kind of like no opposing expectations or no two things that you need to be focusing on. And then relevant action. Again, we all have those days when we're doing a lot of stuff. Those emails, you're clicking a lot of things, you're doing a lot of stuff, you're downloading stuff, you're sending things. But is it relevant? Is it relevant action? Is it actually serving you? Is it actually going into any direction? Are they all just kind of going into their own directions? And by relevant action, the way we see relevant action is personalized action. I'm going to talk about this a bit more after, but the relationship between the individual, the team, and the organization. Of course, the relevant action is always going to be subjective. There's relevant action for the person, there's a relevant action for the team and the organization. But what we really don't do enough, in my opinion, and based on what I see, is take action that is actually relevant for what we need to achieve. And the third one is new experiences. And I've even like highlighted, I wish I could highlight even more the experiences part. Because again, we tend to focus so much in the mind, the knowing, the data, the understanding, the remembering, the visualizing, that we don't really experience it. The only thing we probably experience is the overwhelm, the fact that we feel kind of tired, not sure if we've actually done anything. This is one of the things I hear the most from clients. After a day, like, how do I even know that I've succeeded? How do I know I've finished my day? That experience of not knowing if you've done enough or if you've done the right things or if you've even done anything, that's something that we really want to focus on. How do you experience work? How do you experience your days? Not just how do you know or what did you learn. Again, not saying learning is not good, it's very good, but we need to also include the experience side. How do you feel? The experience of having learned something. And usually, unfortunately, that comes through doing something super uncomfortable or doing something very different, which is not something I would say a lot of us do on a daily, weekly, monthly, or even yearly basis. We tend to kind of gravitate towards things that are easy ish, that are maybe a tiny bit different, but not too different, because then that uncomfortable part and also the organizations that we work at might not be super welcoming of you trying something completely new, which hopefully changes with the whole experiment mindset. And I was trying to think of another word for mindset because it's not about the mind; it's about the experience of the whole being. Maybe I'll find a word at some point for that. But yeah, are there any questions, John, at this point, just before I hop on to the next part?
Definitely, definitely. So we don't have any questions yet, but I want to sort of encourage everybody watching, to put a few things in. I know there are a few people in the comments sort of saying that they're happy to be here. But yeah, if you have any questions, definitely put them in the comments, and then I can bring them back.
Yeah, perfect. And I would be very curious also to hear and have people kind of like tap into which one of the three. Is it the clarity? Is it the experience? Like, what is it that you might be struggling with the most in your uh, personal slash professional development path? So I'm gonna go through this process from the point of view of Nomi, so you get a bit of context and you can ask more kind of targeted questions as well. So as I mentioned, first step is awareness. So this is the understanding part, really like getting to know what you are about, what is important, what you might be struggling with, etc. Awareness. So the way that we pinpoint this, and feel free to use this, I was so happy when I realized how well this plays out with the fingers. But the five themes that we focus on and the five kind of like focus areas that we approach the being at work, being in the workplace, being a part of a team are the following five. So Self-management being the first one. How do you manage yourself? Are you productive? Do you know how you're productive? All of that. Tools and processes. So this means anything from digital tools to, well, my process is very manual. I have a lot of post-its, as you can actually see here. So my processes are very analog, even though I am very digitally oriented otherwise. Communication. So this includes anything from ways of communication, skills, psychological safety, etc. Relationships, which we divide by personal and professional, which is quite interesting. Um, it's a bit different from other competitors that we might have, and well-being as the fifth. And well-being we kind of separate and analyze based on both well-being outside of work and in the workplace, because for most of us those two are at least in some ways intertwined. So the reason I show these five is because it's when you start looking at awareness, what we tend to do is we kind of just focus on the symptom we see, and we tend to make a lot of assumptions on this is the problem I see and this is the solution. When actually, what we notice, especially when we do team scans at Nomi, is that it's actually quite different for different people. So some people might you might have the same symptom, for example, like people don't make deadlines, but there could be any kinds of reasons for this. So someone might not meet a deadline because they honestly just can't get through their to-do list. So a self-management problem. Someone else might really struggle with the tools. They don't understand it. It doesn't work for them. It's not really like working in their process. Someone might just really have misunderstood. The communication was not correct, or they might not even have been in the channel, so they didn't know that they were supposed to do that. Relationship, someone doesn't have the courage or doesn't feel safe to ask for advice, so they might not finish the task because of that. And someone might be not sleeping or moving or have anything going on in their life, and they just can't finish it because they don't have the energy. Again, the symptom that you see is one, whereas there are a whole plethora of potential reasons why that might happen. And that is exactly why we do the awareness part, where we really go deep into what are the reasons, where do the people, the individuals struggle in the team, so that we can see both the individuals and we can help them work on things that are relevant to them, but also to see like, hey, this team as a whole struggles with communication, or this team as a whole has quite an interesting way of viewing relationships, or hey, the tools are wrong. It looks like the tools just do not fit what they need. Again, all of these would have completely different solutions, which is why we really want to get the kind of early part, the awareness part, right. So the way we do it is through a scan. 5 times 11 questions, insanely low number of questions, but the level of insight we get and the feedback we've gotten from people going through it is like, wow, I did not think about this before. And that's the whole point. We really want people to gain understanding and self-awareness when they're going through the questions as well. Really like learning about themselves as they go. And that's also why we, after each one of the sections, we already give resources so that you don't just answer questions, they go into a black box and you know nothing about what's being done with them. So everything's always there for you to see and for you to learn from. So that's the awareness part, really pinpointing where the challenges are, helping people as individuals and as a team, as an organization, to really pinpoint where the core challenges are instead of just focusing on the symptoms. And this is probably, or it's not even probably, this is the reason why I started Nomi in the first place. Because what I kept seeing in the companies that I worked with, whether it was startups or larger organizations, was that everyone could see the symptoms, but no one was really going behind the symptoms. And so then you'd get things like you have like a random training that doesn't really answer the problem, the real root cause of the problem. It just kind of like, it's like a box ticking exercise, essentially. And what I saw was so much wasted time and energy from everyone involved, um, that led to no real change because it was tackling the symptoms and not the root causes. So that's why the awareness piece is so important. Really making sure that people know what it is that they should be working on, being aware of it, because also when you're aware that, hey, okay, my self-management skills are not amazing. I thought they were, but they're maybe not as good as I thought, or there might be something for me to learn there. You have also got the motivation to start working on them. Whereas before that, you might not be as motivated to do it because you don't see the reason why you should work on that. So that's the awareness part, understanding, knowledge, insights, all of that juicy stuff and the deep stuff. Now the action part, and this part I love because it really feeds into the awareness, and this is the part that we don't really see that much in the kind of work life or corporate or startup world. A lot of stuff gets done or is being done, but what is it and why are we doing it? So the way we focus on the action part and the way we do it is based on the insights. We create plans with weekly experiments for each and every person, team wide and organizational. So I'm not gonna go deep into these because I want to give you a bit of time to kind of go into creating your own experiment. But essentially, how it works with us is we create three monthly focuses, 3 monthly themes, and then we create experiments that support your growth throughout the three. So each individual has their own their own path on how to move forward. So individual and group. This is something that I know a lot of people, especially in HR, is like you have the people, you have the individuals, you're working with them, or if you're a manager, again, you have the team, you have the organizational strategy, you have all these expectations coming in, and yet you're still required to kind of work on the individual level, understand each individual is different, support them in their individual needs, and then also support yourself as an individual, which might be different from all of these others. So the way that we see it is that the individual has the experiment. So the individual always works on their own challenges based on the results. You always get your own experiments that are specific for you. Because if me, Maria, let's imagine I have my core challenges are in communication, let's say. I'm not very good at communicating. And then my team member, John, his challenges are in self management. Like he really struggles to stay productive during the day. There's just no way that we could both be experimenting on the same thing and grow in the same optimal way because our challenges are completely different. There's no experiment that's going to serve us both. So that's why the individuals get their own personal experiments. And when I'm going to show you how you can create your own experiments, remember that you can do it for yourself as an individual. This can be something that only you know and you do for yourself. It doesn't need to, you don't need to necessarily tell your team or tell your manager unless it obviously impacts them directly. But these individual experiments are all about actually trying out something new for yourself, experiencing something different, a different way of working, a different behavior, whatever it is.
Would you
And
encourage individuals to sort of share their experiments with each other? I know you said that it is private, but like on the ground, is that something that you found useful?
yes, it's always useful, I find, when you share out of choice. So if you want to share your experiment and you want accountability, for example, it is extremely helpful. But if you share because you're told to, it can be quite counterproductive, which is why we don't share anyone's experiments with anyone else. But it is highly, highly, highly encouraged to share your experiments with someone, because the more you, even though the product we have is digital and in theory you can of course do everything digitally, But I mean, we all know from experience if there's someone that we've told we're going to do something and they ask us, we're more likely to do it, right? So the accountability of a real human, either in your team, with your manager, or on the organizational level, we can actually even link you up with someone in another office, maybe. Like it doesn't need to be someone you're in the same location in, or even in the same department. You might just be buddied up with someone who's working on the same focus or the same theme. But again, no one would be forced to do that, because some of the experiments, I mean, the goal of the experiments is that they are challenging but doable. So it should always be something that is a bit uncomfortable, because otherwise, if you're doing something you're already comfortable with, you're probably not really experimenting. You're just doing something you already do, right?
Doing
So it's
something a
some
little doing something a little uncomfortable is a way to grow, right? You can't sort of grow from that.
exactly.
Could you maybe give us an example of one of the experiments, something that you sort of
Yeah.
saw on the ground that was useful?
Yeah, so yeah, my favorite one is so simple. So I was working with the manager who had some challenges with his team relationships. So communicating with his team members, great person, but he had quite a specific way of expressing himself. And that led to a lot of conflict with the team members, even though he was just really enthusiastic. But there was a bit of a miscommunication in the way that he was expressing himself. So one of the experiments he had was for his one-to-ones to always start with the statement of, okay, for a week, this one-to-one, I am just going to give you 5 minutes to speak, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever the time. I'm going to time it. I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm just going to listen. And then after that, we can discuss whatever it is that you want to talk about. And a few days, I think it was 2 days after he started doing that, he called me and he was like, Maria, this is the first time I haven't had conflict in my meetings. And the only thing he did was take a 3 to 5 minute silent kind of break in the beginning and verbalize that he was not going to interrupt the people. So that's a very good example of, it's not about adding something new or you need to do an exercise on top of your day. It's about like changing something in your day that you already do, but just doing it in a slightly different way. Experimenting with a new way of doing something you already do. So that would be an example, and a really powerful one actually, and very simple. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good example of how the experiments might look like. It's always something doable. Again, it was really uncomfortable for him because he was not used to it. He was not used to taking that time to not kind of like give his feedback, give his information, but it was doable. He could obviously take that 5 minutes and not say anything, and that shifted the way that he behaved after as well. So on an individual level, they can be anything from that to really shifting the way that you do your to-do list, for example. Again, it completely depends on what the challenges of the individual are. On the team level, so as you can imagine, everyone in the team are going to be working on their own personal paths, right? So everyone knows that, okay, if there's something weird going on, it's maybe because people are testing out new behaviors. So on the team level, when you're all working on experiments and you all know that everyone's working on experiments, it becomes easier to try things out because everyone knows that everyone's trying new things. So it kind of like fosters this sense of exploration and like curiosity. So you don't need to be working on the same thing in order to feel supported in that team, because everyone's doing something slightly uncomfortable, um, and reflecting on it, and kind of like learning from it together. And when you start living this way, like when you start running the experiments, it becomes so natural to just keep doing them. So you start doing one or two and you still need to kind of think about it. After a while, it becomes natural. You just start kind of naturally falling into the habit of trying new things and knowing that you can do it for the week, or you can keep doing it for a longer time, and then you don't need to do it forever. So it's this, it's not a mindset, it's a way of being. It becomes a part of who you are. Just like, okay, this week I'm going to do it differently, let's see what happens. Just the kind of open mind and curiosity. um so that's the team level. So the teams also do experiments. These are usually observed and kind of managed, looked after by the manager. These are not weekly, so no one has like two weekly experiments at the same time, because again, it's about having one focus. And this, I would say, for anyone who wants to create experiments, just do one at a time. You can't really be experimenting with three things, because again, they might be interacting with one another. And how are you going to measure that? How are you going to know which one made the change and which one didn't? So always just one experiment at a time. That's really key for making experiments work optimally. And on an organizational level, you actually kind of asked about that, John. So while you can obviously like link people together throughout the organization, so it doesn't necessarily just need to be your closest team. On an organizational level, what we do is we offer insights and analysis of, hey, this is how your units are. They might compare in a certain way or not. And then there are obviously like proposed actions, but there are no like organizational experiments at this point at that level, because people are already working on them in an individual and team level. So the organization is more about the understanding and seeing what actions can be taken and which directions should be moved into for optimal kind of growth for everyone. This is just to show like in a very, again, can't take the consultant out of me apparently. So the easiest way to do it is honestly 3 months, 4 weeks per month, have a focus for each one. Each experiment is weekly, so 4 weekly experiments per theme. That's it. And then you have a team focus and organizational focus. Honestly, that's how simple it is. It's not a complex way of working, but it is a very powerful one. So I don't know if there are any questions or insights that have come up before I dive into how we can actually do this in practice.
So a little more, excuse me, just a little more questions about sort of the experiments
Yeah.
themselves. How would an employee develop an experiment, and how much is sort of Nomi sort of helping influence them and helping them sort of train how to build that experiment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the way that we work and the way that Nomi functions is that we give you the experiments based on the scans. However, because it is such an easy process or a natural process, I mean, it's a very simple process. It's the what, how, why. I mean, it's really, it's not a complex thing. But the way that we as Naomi work is we aim for clarity. So we give you a weekly focus. So you don't need to figure it out for yourself. You have something, you know, it's based on your results. You try it, you learn. That's the way that that Nomi works. But yeah, when, like I said, like when you start doing it, it becomes natural. So you become able to really focus on and create your own experiments as well, because this does not only work at work. Like you can do experiments anywhere in your life, relationships, personal life, way of life, where you live, how you do family events, anywhere. I mean, you can experiment anything. So while you might get experiments from Nomi, um, if we also work with individuals occasionally in a more personal level, if they have a more strategic goal for themselves, in which case there's more coaching involved if they want to do that, and then we can co-create the experiments with them. But that's kind of like a more close collaboration way of working together. But yeah, I mean, experiments are not very complex to create. It's just about like knowing what you need to experiment, actually doing it and measuring it. That is usually the tricky part.
Definitely. And like this is where I think Nomi is so interesting, right? Because like people analytics as a function is going through this big revolution where we used to do reporting and dashboards. And I think that's a little bit maybe closer to sort of the beginning of Nomi, where you're sort of doing the assessment and we're gathering that data. And it's really trying to move to sort of say that, we can make the best dashboards in the world and they might not make a business difference, right? So as we're
Exactly.
trying to sort of develop this in people analytics, how can we do more experiments? How can we better connect sort of the decisions, not just building something interesting? I think Nomi is sort of, you're a little bit ahead of the curve or much ahead of the curve, and really trying to sort of like inject this into the population of, things don't have to be this rigid, right? Whether you're at an enterprise company or even a startup company, right? Things are very rigid based on the leadership, based on the structure, based on the politics. And it seems what you're doing is sort of moving that rigidity a little bit and sort of playing around with it to sort of find areas that we can sort of all grow as individuals.
Yeah, for sure. And exactly like you said, like these can be tied together. So we have people who are tying their experiments to their OKRs, or like there's so many ways that you can link these together. They're not separate. It's more about like how can we take all the information we already have? How do we actually use the data that we have? And can we use that to as a way to create experiments? And for HR people, especially who have access to that data, when we work with HR people who and we run the scan with the teams or individuals, we can use and cross pollinate from those other data sources as well. We can
Mm,
create experiment paths based on strategic objectives. If you know that the company is going to be going through a really massive change into a certain direction, one of those four monthly experiments can be about that. It can be something that really makes sure that the people in the company are already experimenting with something that is going to be important in, I don't know, a quarter or two. So there are different ways that you can use the experiment. We always include some, at least 50% from the personal results, but the other 50% can be utilized, that we can utilize either other data sources or strategic aims to make sure that people are learning in practice. Because that's, I think, one of the things that we've talked about in the past as well, and I hear a lot from HR people, is this kind of how do you support people through a change when you can't communicate everything,
mm-hmm.
like maybe throughout the process. You might know something that the company is still kind of working on, and it's like you're in this weird in between, right?
Yeah.
But while and the company might have an idea, what you can already start doing is kind of embedding the skills that are necessary for the employees to better kind of weather the storm that might be coming. You can already embed that into the experiments, without kind of, so you're just like nurturing the skills they need beforehand. So it can be used in different ways, right?
That's so interesting. I run a few M&As from the HR standpoint, and having something like this, sort of getting in front of it and sort of building those skills and that flexibility before you can sort of announce to everybody, that sounds, it's revolutionary, honestly. I don't want to get more in the way of your presentation because people are really interested in this, but
Yeah.
no, this is really cool.
Yeah. And honestly, like, for example, like who was taught how to receive bad news in anywhere in life? I don't remember having learned that. So
Very
even
true.
like, yeah, so
Yeah.
like even doing that, like, I mean, obviously not in a obvious way like that. Like, okay, everyone's has an experiment about like how to accept bad news. Like, hey, no one knows it's gonna be terrible in a month. Not in a direct way like that, but there are skills that we can nurture and we should actually nurture because those skills are not taught anywhere else. And also you can read all you want about conflict, for example, and still suck at it. Because if you
That's
don't
very
actually
true.
it, it's not
Definitely.
gonna it's not gonna change. So let me give you a tiny, I mean, this is again, like I said, experimenting is not complex. I am giving all the secrets. You can do it yourself. It's really this simple. So you need to have a question, find the question. What is the question you want to answer? You need to figure out an activity to answer that question, and then you need to iterate a bit deeper in practice. So you need to find the question to answer. What is the question that you would like to answer? So you can think about this not necessarily related to work, but maybe in your personal life. What question would you like to answer? Whether it might be, and this is maybe things that people ask me is like, oh, should I leave my job and move to Bali or whatever? This might be the question. Mm, so instead of, and this is what people sometimes ask me as well, is like, oh, does it mean that I need to experiment? I need to sell all my stuff and move to Bali? No, you don't need to sell all your stuff and move to Bali. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you might want to find the exact question you have. So, what are you unsure about in that question? Is it living abroad? Maybe you haven't traveled. You want to know how it is abroad. So, in that case, the behavior change to explore the answer to that question might be just to take a longer trip abroad. That would be the experiment. Experiment how it is to live a normal life abroad. If if it's something else, if it's, for example, do I don't really like my job, do I need to resign? Is that the experiment? Again, probably not. You don't need to resign, but you can find something else. So you can find a different way of doing the job. What are the things that you don't like about the job? Can you change one of those for a week? Just finding the tiniest part of that behavior or that question and change that tiny part. Because again, you don't need to change everything because then you don't know what you're measuring. Again, if you do quit your job, you sell your house, you sell your stuff, you get a divorce and you move to Bali and things change, how are you going to know which one of those things was the reason for the positive or the negative change? So what I would actually advise is always change just one thing at a time so that you can actually see and measure if it works or not. So find the question. What is the question that you'd like to answer? Find a behavior change, a way to change your practical experience of life that would help you answer that question, and make it as small as you can. The tinier, the better. That's pretty much the way it works. And then the third one, you can decide on a time frame. I always usually recommend a weekly experiment. But again, if your experiment is to move to Bali, maybe a week is not enough. Maybe in that case, you do need a longer time frame. So again, take everything with a grain of salt. But the reason I recommend a weekly cycle before you decide to keep, iterate, change it a bit, or just scrap it is that I noticed this over the years that it's better to do something for a week, full in, committed, actually do it, than to do something like kind of half assed for a month. Because if you do something half assed for a month, can you really tell if it works or not? Not necessarily. Whereas for a week, you can probably go full in. You can probably change a behavior for a week because a week is really, it's really short, but you still get the momentum and you've done it few enough times that you've at least gotten over the kind of beginning challenge that you might have with whatever it is. So that's the reason for the weekly cycle that we use and what I usually recommend, because we have a very, I mean, we have a very terrible focus cycle these days. I personally don't know if I could commit to something for a month. Maybe some other people have better patience and are more kind of suitable for longer term plans. But for me, at least, the week is perfect. And this I noticed also with clients over the years. So that would be pretty much the way to explore experiment. Find the question, find the behavior, teeny tiny behavior, and then decide on when, what day, and on what specs you're going to decide whether to keep it, adapt it, or stop doing it. And also always remember, like, there's no commitment to you have to keep it ever. If you do it for a week, you decide it doesn't work, amazing. Just let it go. At least you gave it a try, right?
like experimentation, you find something out, right? Whether it's good or bad, you found it out. I'm
Exactly.
really interested in sort of this week concept, specifically around like Scrum sprints, where you have a week or 2 week sprints, right? And you have that retrospective at the end, right? What did we do? What can we do in better? It sort of seems like for humans, at least, humans as of today, that week thing really makes a lot of sense. I do
Yeah.
sort of wonder if, in the future, we're going to have to sort of either thin it down more, people's attention spans are going to get even lighter, or if there's going to be sort of a swinging back of the pendulum to sort of think that, we can sort of, rethink how we're approaching these and sort of
Mhm.
develop something that's going to be a little longer lasting. But for right now, it sort of seems like the week is definitely the right point to it.
Yeah, a week is good because it allows for new, like really different things to be explored. So, and also the first option is to keep. So you can always keep it. You can keep it for 2 weeks. You can readjust in another week. You always have the option to keep doing it. It's just that you have kind of have like that out after the week that like if this really doesn't work, if I hate it, I can just get rid of it, which makes it easier to actually do it. Um, I remember this personally with meditation because I mean, for years I was like, I really want to meditate. Like, I really want to get into meditation. But I always had this idea that I would have to do it forever, every day. And that kept me from actually even starting it. And then I did this weekly experiment and I was like, okay, I'll just do it for a week. And after that, I actually started doing it. Because I didn't have that pressure of, oh, this is forever. I need to do this for the rest of my life. The human brain is very, yeah, it's a funny place. It's exactly the same action, but just by adjusting the time frame, it becomes easier to actually do it.
Definitely, and I think that those are a lot of the sort of like the focuses and the strategies that we're trying to sort of use, right? Like, what's that small tweak in how we're approaching this, or how we're starting to set that structure that's going to have a much bigger consequence. And I think this is where sometimes, especially on like the more people analytics side, like we think of people as these sort of like computers or robots, right? If we sort of have this thing, then they're going to obviously act in that way. And humans are just a lot more complex, right? So really trying to take a step back
Mhm.
and sort of say, can we go to where they are and make the tweak in that environment that's going to be more successful to them versus something where we're going to do a tweak and expect, this result when it's not really exactly sort of set up for the people. Coming from compensation, a lot of times the idea is like if you give them more money, they're going to be happier. And that is definitely not played out in the research and it's definitely not played out in practice, right? Really engaging with people and sort of going to where they are and understanding what they need, that's the way to really sort of, move the needle.
Yeah, for sure. And the motivation part, I touched upon it in the insights and awareness part. Is like when you see that, hey, oh, okay, I really thrive in these themes. Like I obviously I'm very good at self-management, let's say, but it looks like communication is not that strong. Like that is true. I would actually like it to be a stronger point in my professional kind of professional life or personal life. So it's like when you actually get that awareness and you start thinking about it, you create that internal motivation because you start noticing things that you might not really have seen before. So yeah, it's the internal external motivation is a really big one actually, and that's something that we get asked quite often, like, oh, should we reward people for something? Like I would always say no, because what you actually want is to keep it fun, to keep it interesting for people to explore new things because of the learnings that they have or
Mhm.
because of the internal experience, instead of, yeah, doing it for an external reward.
Exactly. And this is where I think, there's a pretty harsh line between something like what you're doing, with Nomi versus something that's like the performance process that we have, right? That a lot of times is linked to compensation, is a lot of like judgment of the manager on the employee, right? What you're
Yeah.
doing here is you're really trying to sort of go to where the employee is and say, we're going to do this assessment, right? So we can have like a third party view on the employee and try to have them see stuff that they're not really seeing. And then we're going to have them run these experiments to sort of test out some stuff to sort of find what's the right thing with them. And that's something that like is so much more engaging than having a manager say you're doing good or bad, or having compensation amounts that are related to you being, trying to indicate whether you're good or bad, right? And if we give employees that type of environment where they feel like they're growing and expressing something new and the team around them is growing, like, that's a whole different level than most of the things that HR is doing right now.
100%. And we've done what we've done in the past is we've linked it with performance reviews in the past. One thing that was really interesting about it is that we had someone who'd worked in a company, I think it was 3 years, and he took the scan, we analyzed the results, and we read the performance review. And it was pretty much the same. Like we could pinpoint the same things from the scan as the person who had known him and managed him for 3 years. But the actions that came from both were super different because the ones that we gave him were like, tackle this thing with this, do this differently so you can do this one per week. Whereas in the performance review world, it's more like you need to learn to communicate better so you have less conflict,
Mm.
or you will be fired in the next performance review.
Definitely, definitely. So we are
Yeah.
sort of be closing in on time relatively soon.
Yeah.
Just one more question. So I know a lot of this is about the assessment side, but even more of it's about the experimentation. You talked a lot about the experimentation, but just to sort of jump back to the assessment, can you maybe just talk a little bit about sort of some of the questions or how you're trying to figure out or how you develop these questions? 11 by 5 is just honestly not a lot of questions to be able to find the same insights as somebody that managed somebody for a year with a few amount of questions. Help the audience sort of understand a little bit of how you approach that and how you built that out.
Yeah, so that's something that honestly I'm a designer, but I still always find it crazy that you decide something that didn't exist before. Every single time we get the analysis part, I'm always like, maybe this time it's not gonna work. But yeah, it does. It's crazy. So yeah, it's not a lot of questions. It takes like 2 minutes per section to fill in, so it's like a 10-minute total. It's really short. Short as a whole. I can let me see. I think I have, yeah, here. So the reason that we get such interesting insights is I'm not going to go into all. I'll just share my favorite one, which is the relationships one. So the way we measure or assess or analyze relationships, for example, is it's always on a two-axis system. So this one we measure through personal and professional relationships. So there is a really big difference between a person or a company or a team where people have high personal relationships. So this might be a place where everyone gets along, there's a lot of gossip, people like each other, like everyone gets along. It's a nice place to work. Everyone has a lot of fun. But imagine it's at the same time, and this is from personal experience, it might be low professional relationships. So you like the people, they're cool, you really want to go and grab a beer with them, but you can't actually trust that they deliver their work. You actually need to keep checking in when there's a deadline. You feel super anxious because you don't actually trust that your colleagues are going to deliver. If you think about the kind of activities, or whether it's trainings or a retreat or whatever it is that you want to do, or you might think is good to do if the relationships in your company are bad, if you have a team that has high personal relationships, um, they probably won't benefit that much from, a day out having fun together because they already have fun. They already enjoy each other's company. But if they at the same time have low professional relationships, that might actually just require like creating a better org chart. Or maybe they don't know how their roles are interconnected. Maybe they don't even know what their role is. But maybe they don't know what their colleagues do. So it's very different in terms of solutions depending on like where you land on all of these quadrants. And that's why even with 11 questions, we get to quite deep insights because we measure in a very different way. Measure. I use the word measure in in quotes because it's not really measuring, but the questions really like tackle all of these different aspects. Um, and it's, yeah, psychological safety versus skills. Again, very different solutions, very different insights from these. So yeah, we get really deep with the not that many questions. I think it's because of the time and the effort we spent creating the questions and crafting the questions in the beginning.
Definitely. No, it's really fascinating. We are coming down to the end. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about next steps. I know a lot of people are very
Yeah.
interested in this. I think what you're doing is really revolutionary and going to be, something that a lot of our teams are sort of slowly trying to get towards, and you're already there. So how could people sort of reach out for next steps?
Yeah, so the easiest way, because I don't think you can click anything here, or maybe I can share a link, is to go to nomi.co. You can book a call with me. So the best thing is to actually go through what is happening in your organization, and we also work with individuals. So as an individual, if you really wanna grow in your professional life, just book a demo. So 25 minutes, half an hour, we go deeper into your situation. In that demo, we always send you one of the sections and then we analyze it. We actually analyze it for you. So the next time you'll see what it looks like in practice and you'll get the experience and you'll even get some example experiments. Because this is one of the things that I really struggled personally because I'm not a salesperson, I'm a human and design person. Was like, how do I help people see what it is, mm, without like having sold it? And then I realized I can just actually show you how it is, and that's it. And no strings attached. Just for you to get the experience and to get experiments to try out. So you always get one or two experiments from that call.
Very cool, very cool. And there'll be some links in the description of this. So if anybody does want to get in contact, that we can click on the screen, we can definitely go in the description. And as the very last thing, I want to say thank you. This was really cool. I find your product really fascinating. I think this is so inventive and so innovative and exactly where we need to be going. But I'm going to stop and give you the last word. What's the one thing that you want to tell this audience? Outside of that, we'll just close down right there. So I want to say thank you one more time, and then give you the space.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was super fun. And yeah, I think like the one thing that I always, and this is from my old consulting days, anyone can experiment and you can experiment anything you want. You just need to really like take the first step, find the right question, find the smallest part that you need to or can experiment and just go for it. There's really like nothing, there's nothing to lose there. So here's to experimenting. Thank you everyone for joining.